which probably leads me on to the, in a household, do we completely exclude gluten for everyone or do we not? And, there are pros and cons both ways. And when we're looking at potential risk for other household members, we're never going to know if they don't keep eating gluten. Comment, Sophie?
That's absolutely a very valid point. If we're wanting to get diagnosis for other members of the household, to exclude or diagnose, they need to be having sufficient amounts of gluten, and that can be really challenging if more than one member of the household actually does have celiac, because it's quite a decent amount. 2 to 4 slices, as you were saying earlier, 2 to 4 slices of bread a day for 8 weeks is required for the sufficient.
Well, how do you manage it in your household?
So at home, we before children, we ran a completely gluten-free house. My husband very kindly committed to a gluten-free house at home, which was great. We had the single-use toaster. We didn't need to think about it or worry about it in any way, shape, or form. When my beautiful boys arrived, we made the decision that actually the best protective strategy we could have for them on a go-forward basis in terms of celiac and if they were ever going to develop it or not was actually to feed them gluten. So what we did initially was that we said, right, whenever you go to your grandparents' house, grandparents, it's up to you to feed my children as much gluten as you possibly can. And they were very willing participants, which we're very grateful for. So that's how it started. And then slowly, as I've got more confident in terms of how I can manage gluten in a way that I feel safe and comfortable, because I'm very symptomatic, which is helpful.
And some of that's been the expense of very hungry 2.5 and 4.5-year-olds.
Yes, my boys, I'm very worried for when my boys are teenagers, because the amount that they consume at 2 and 4 is horrifying. And if they consume that much when they're proportionately that much when they're 18, I'm very concerned. But yeah, with how expensive everything is and how expensive gluten-free products are these days, it's amazing that they're on the market and I love them and I don't fault them. But when your kids are eating a loaf of bread a day, you don't want to be paying the $9 for the gluten-free loaf. You'd rather buy them the standard. So I guess from my perspective, it kind of comes down to what your comfort levels are.
Okay, one of my hot tips for families to help with their initial stages of whether the family's going to some of the family members consume gluten-free products and some not, and I often suggest getting a box of red dots and a box of green dots, go through the pantry, the fridge, the fruit bowl, the veggie bin, and identify which products are gluten-free and which products are gluten containing, which allows the cook really easy. You're not reading the minute label every time you're cooking, but also it's really positive for the newly diagnosed celiac, and that they open the fridge, they open the pantry, they see the fruit bowl, and they see the sea of green dots in front of them. And it just reminds them that actually there are more things in the world that don't contain gluten than there are that do contain gluten. And in our pantry at home, 10 years on, I can still easily identify my gluten-free breadcrumbs to my gluten-containing breadcrumbs. So it's one way that it just makes it really easy for families. And let's face it, in most households, dinner's always going to be sort of a shared meal that's gluten-free, but there's no reason why other family members can't continue to eat gluten at other meals. And we've got a wee holiday house with a very, very small kitchen. And certainly that's the way that we manage it there. And to date, I don't think we've poisoned you.
Touch wood.
And shared dinners are always gluten-free. The majority of lunch is gluten-free. We'll have regular bread. And yes, if it's a windy day, we leave the gluten-containing bread on the bench inside for people to get what they want so that we don't risk crumbs outside. But breakfast and things, we're each doing our individual gluten-free or gluten-containing.
There's lots of different options for ways in which you can kind of structure having both gluten consumers and gluten non-consumers in your house, there's a way to have them both.